Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a threat briefing on the healthcare industry titled Securing the Healthcare Industry, Actionable Intelligence for an Active Threat Landscape. My name is Julia Kirsten. I'm the Global Events and Marketing Manager here at Trustwave, and I will be your host. Today, we're bringing together security experts Sean Kennedy, Director of SpiderLabs Threat Hunting, and Carl Siegler, Senior Security Research Manager of SpiderLabs Threat Intelligence, to break down significant trends currently affecting the healthcare industry, how to analyze the attack flow specific to the healthcare industry, and actionable advice to mitigate every step of the attack cycle. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you can get the most out of today's session. So if you're viewing this session live or on our webinar platform allows you to customize your viewer screen. Feel free to adjust the size and positioning of the different windows to accommodate your liking. We do recommend that you use Chrome as the browser of choice. If you have any problems with the audio or session delivery, I always recommend that you hit refresh. I promise you will not need to re-log in, and hopefully the system will overcome any connectivity issues. Today's webinar will include both a presentation and a question and answer session. You will find the questions window in your webinar screen, and we encourage you to enter questions as you think of them throughout the presentation, and we will address as many as possible at the end. Lastly, today's presentation will be recorded, and we will be sending a follow-up email to everyone with a link to that recording. A copy of the recording will be made available on demand on our website for future reference. Without further ado, let's get started. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thanks, Julie. Good day, everybody. Thanks for your time today. We are going to be going through just what Julie said. We're going to be talking about the current threat landscape as we see it for the healthcare industry. I'm here with my colleague, Sean Kennedy, and we'll be sort of going back and forth with just an overview of what is contained in the full report. I want to start out with just sort of a level setting. Cybersecurity in healthcare it's become pretty major, especially since the pandemic. I think we saw a brief period of time when the pandemic was first happening, where a lot of threat actors were kind of leaving off the healthcare industry a little bit. And those days are long gone by. Last year, 2022, $28.5 million in 20 million healthcare records breached in that year. And that's up 7.5 million from the previous year. So it's increasing. This is absolutely an increasing trend. And the average cost of a data breach in healthcare, 10.1 million versus 4.4 million in other industries, other organizations. There's a lot of unique reasons for this, how healthcare handles security, the uniqueness of healthcare as an industry, and how it stores data, that type of data, and how it addresses both security issues and compromises. All of these things really complicate the entire situation. We have all kinds of cases. You see these headlines all the time with the Medibank data breach that impacted 9.7 million customers. Australia regulators said that they need to set aside $167 million just to deal with the cleanup of the data breach. We see patient records getting leaked all the time. Third-party data breaches are a big part of this. We're going to cover that a little bit later in the, we'll go deeper into that. But third-party data breaches are a huge concern for healthcare and for every industry, to be honest. And then we see cases. There was a case in Illinois where a healthcare organization, SMB hospital, was actually forced to shut down because of a ransomware attack. So they were not able to recover their business model. They were not able to recover as a business at all, and had to shut down and lay off all their employees. Actually, this happened to me here in Atlanta. My wife is a mental health counselor who worked a counseling crisis line for a while, and the organization she was working for got hit with a ransomware attack. And that organization basically had to lay off everybody and start over from scratch. They went bankrupt because of it. So this is prevalent. I think most of us are only 1 or 2 degrees separated from these types of breaches, especially if you work in healthcare. And here are some of the things that make it unique to this industry specifically. Custom applications are widespread in the healthcare industry. A lot of healthcare groups have custom applications that are either designed in-house or provided for them for their own unique needs. And when you have custom applications like this, one, a lot of times attention to the details, especially the security controls in those applications, aren't really paid attention to. And since it's a unique custom application for the organization, a lot of times it doesn't go through the auditing process or even just the eyes available for larger enterprise applications. Third-party reliance is huge in the healthcare industry. Healthcare organizations are always relying on a lot of third parties, whether it's labs, whether it's processing organizations for imaging, whether it's specialists. There's all kinds of business partnerships and health care partnerships that complicate the situation quite a bit. When you have so many elements involved, you're going to find chinks in the armor, and this is where a lot of risk gets introduced. Internet of Things is a big concern for healthcare. It seems to be more prevalent in the healthcare industry than a lot of other industries, except for maybe OT or manufacturing. And in the healthcare industry specifically, we're talking about devices that you wouldn't necessarily consider being a computer that actually have access to the network, access to the internet, and a lot of times, and introduces potentially risks to your environment. With Internet of Things in the healthcare industry, we're talking about things like heart monitors, infusion pumps, which is a big one that we hear over and over again in the security releases, where an infusion pump may be vulnerable to exploitation, and we have lives at risk here. The compliance issues also complicate things, right? The healthcare industry is being forced to comply with a lot of regulations, a lot of governance that a lot of other organizations don't, just because of the sensitivity of the data and because there's human lives on the line. So there are a lot of laws in place, a lot of regulations in place that healthcare organizations need to take into account for every single decision. But when it comes to security specifically, this can impact how security is implemented in these organizations. Because of these compliance laws, because of these governance laws, because of auditing that maybe you passed the previous quarter, you're going to be a little bit more change adverse. You're not going to put patches on as frequently. You can't take the risk of going out of compliance. So you're going to need to vet those things. You have extra steps in place because of these compliance rules and regulations that are going to complicate, again, patching those risks and getting yourself more secure. And this also goes hand in hand with patient care. The unique thing to the healthcare industry is that human lives are on the line here. So patient care is specifically unique to this situation because, again, with security, a lot of times we are more concerned about protecting the data than we are making that data available, right? So security and IT administrators are constantly getting into a fight about the availability of services versus locking those services down. We see these arguments in organizations quite a bit. With patient care, availability is always going to supersede, right? We cannot take the chance of a Microsoft patch blue screening a system that patients depend on for their livelihood. So again, we have these additional steps, these additional obstacles in place, compliance rules, the fact that lives are on the line, these new devices, a multitude of third parties that you're working with. And all of this introduces risk in general into the organization. So that said, this is the report. This is the full-blown report for everything we're going to be covering today. So we only have an hour where we're going to go through this presentation probably far too quickly. So if there's anything that you here that you want to dig into a little bit more deeper, this is where you want to go. This is the report. It's completely free to download. And there were two things that we really wanted to do with this report. One, we wanted to make it educational, right? We wanted to show you what we're seeing from our perspective, what our analysts see, what is actually going on with healthcare specifically, and what's unique to healthcare from a threat landscape perspective. But we see a lot of these reports that just go over these trends and that's it. We wanted to provide some mitigation, some advice, some actual actionable data here as well. Things that you can take home and implement today, or things that you can at least sit down and discuss with your teams to figure out how you might address some of these risks. So with that said, let's dig into the main slides. Emerging and prominent trends. So there are some basic trends that we saw that we wanted to flag as specific overarching concerns for the healthcare industry. This first one is AI, generative AI, LLMs, ChatGPT. You've probably heard of this. When I say emerging trends, this is one of the ones that are emerging, right? We don't really see a lot of AI being used right now, but it's concerning for us. And it's concerning for us for a variety of different reasons. One, really, although LLMs and generative AI have been around forever, ChatGPT 3 and then 3.5, released last November, seemed to break the dam open. And that's where we started to see a lot of concerns, a lot of playing around with these LLMs. And that hasn't even been a year yet. It's incredible to me to think back to last December when people were really kind of blowing up with this and playing around with it, to where we are right now, where we're actually talking about this in slides. And it's progressing so fast, so quickly. This time next year, we'll have entirely new slides and entirely new risk to discuss here. What we're seeing in generative AI and the LLMs, it's not terribly concerning right now, but again, it's something that you should probably put on your radar as a concern. What we're seeing is the LLMs today, they're being used primarily for a variety of things, but I think probably the biggest concern right now is the enhancements to phishing attacks. And the reason for that is twofold. People talk about ChatGPT being able to code, all those script kiddies are going to be able to just go to ChatGPT and say, develop an exploit for this vulnerability. It doesn't work that way, right? In fact, even if you understand coding, you have to do a lot of verification for any advice that comes out of ChatGPT for any of that code. You need to know how to code to use ChatGPT as a coding tool. That's not true for language itself, right? And that's where ChatGPT and other LLMs' main strength is, natural language processing. We're going to hit it later, but phishing is the #1 technique used to get a foothold in an organization. That's where compromises start. And our ability to flag these phishing emails outside of technology is red flags that our brains just pop up as we read through, right? And this is typically clumsy language, bad grammar, missed case and verbs, things like that. And that's because a lot of the threat actors creating these phishing emails, putting these emails together, they speak English as a second language, or whatever language they're putting these emails together in. It's typically a second language for them, which is why that clumsiness is a red flag for us. ChatGPT changes that. ChatGPT naturally speaks English, and it doesn't take more than 2 or 3 minutes, even less than that, 30 or 40 seconds, to get your email compelling, sounding not only native, but maybe sounding as like a specific voice. So we'll probably see a bit of that. We're not seeing a lot of it right now, but we probably will see a bit of that. Yeah, again, for right now, I think the biggest concern is to really just sort of get ahead of the threat. We're not seeing any major activity using this right now. We haven't seen any major campaigns that we're capitalizing on ChatGPT in any massive way. But again, considering the interest and considering a lot of other issues involved, get ahead of the curve now. This is a perfect time to do it. Get used to the technology, put together a working group of a couple of people just to discuss it in-house and see exactly how this may affect you down the road. Keep on top of all the news that is going on, because this is a rapidly changing area of concern.
I'd like to add to that, if I could, real quick, Carl.
Absolutely.
Another part of the problem with this exciting new technology of ChatGPT, where it's just absolutely exploded. You can't go on TikTok or YouTube Shorts and not see something about some AI technology, and everyone's building new technology on top of it. And so, data leakage and data control is already a problem. I mean, that's cross industry, but in healthcare as well. And so as people are trying to use these technologies, they're not thinking about the risk that they may be imposing. So they may be trying to use ChatGPT, let's say, as to come up with a nice email back to maybe a patient, let's say. Well, what you're actually doing is you're providing information into a cloud-based server, with patient information. So you have a problem with accidental data leakage. And so that's a huge one, I think, that really needs to be understood and really explained to personnel so they understand the risk that these technologies are or could impose.
Yeah, it's such a great point, because we've seen multiple compromises over the past several months where the prompts that people are using had been stored in those cloud servers, like Sean said, and actually leaked publicly. Samsung lost intellectual property source code because their coders were using ChatGPT to help them tune their own code. And with privacy being such a massive concern in the healthcare industry, that's a really good point, Sean. Thank you. Anytime you're using ChatGPT, whenever you're using most of these LLMs, unless you have an in-house instance that you trained yourself, all the data that you're putting in there is not private, is not confidential, and that needs to be a big concern for almost all these organizations. That's probably a bigger threat than most of the others we've discussed. Good. Let's talk about ransomware.
Ransomware. Fun times.
Fun times. Yeah, so ransomware as a threat is massive, right? And we saw ransomware really pick up, mainly because it was instantly monetizable for a lot of organizations, right? You hold the data hostage, they pay you to get the data back, done deal, everybody walks away. Well, the threat actors walk away happy. And you don't have to worry about selling data on the underground or anything else. These days, we're seeing more of a two-step process. Exfiltration for XP in some form or fashion. So yeah, Sean, you hit the ransomware groups more often than I do. Do you want to talk to us a little bit?
Absolutely. So, it wasn't that long ago, just a few years ago, in fact, and I think, Carl, you touched on it in the beginning here, where healthcare was almost considered safe from being targeted against or being used being targeted with ransomware. In fact, some of the rules of engagement of the different ransomware groups out there took an ethical stance against, attacking healthcare. Do not attack healthcare. You will not be an affiliate of our group if you attack healthcare, and things of that nature, because, these threat actors are they care about people and they didn't want to hurt anyone. Those days are long gone, especially with a lot of groups where, everyone sort of knows what to do now. Don't pay, right? Everyone says, don't pay, don't pay. We are still seeing payment, and so what's happening is that these threat actors are now making it more compelling to pay. So they'll add additional extortion techniques. But regardless if you pay or not, the cost of a ransomware attack is huge, right? Outside of the ransomware payment, you're paying the victims for PII leakage. There's a lot of cost and remediation efforts, the cost of investigation, cost of regulatory fines, loss of business, as Carl mentioned earlier. And then of course, in healthcare, there's an added problem with just life or death, right? So if systems go down and there's people in critical states, that could be a real big problem. And so a lot of the threat actors, how they're evolving their extortion tactics to get those payments, they're adding a lot of extra. I like to call them extra. So first, they're going to encrypt all of your critical files, but before they do that, they're going to take some information. They're going to exfiltrate information, and then they're going to use a double extortion technique to say, hey, if you don't pay the ransom, then we're just going to leak your data. And they've now gone even further and said, hey, if you don't pay for the ransom, we'll leak your data, but we'll also DDoS you, which is a problem. And now we've seen where the threat actors are so bold, they have patient information. They'll reach out to the patients themselves and say, hey, this healthcare organization, we breached them and they're not going to pay. So we're going to leak your data unless you pay, which is increasingly bold on the threat actors' side. Even worse, we've seen how a group known as Black Cat, They're actually a splinter group from an old ransomware group that was out at Conti. But they've gone as low as leaking data of breast cancer patients, which is just above and beyond the necessary, and that really puts me at a level with these guys. So, it's not an emerging threat necessarily. Ransomware is, always going to be around. It's been around for a while, but the tactics to get that money have been evolving constantly. So some mitigations around that, really regularly training your personnel to really understand the threat, and really, I would say rewarding them for turning in, hey, I clicked the link, and reward that, if it was something bad, or rewarding, reporting spam, things like that would really help. Obviously, as far as data goes, you want to make sure that you have backups. That's sort of a security 101. Keep those offline. One thing that you might not know is that these threat actor groups, these ransomware groups, work with initial access brokers. And as they gain a foothold in, one of the things that they're doing is they're going to do some recon, and they're going to look for cyber insurance documents. They'll take that data and use that and leverage it for ransomware payments. So they'll even say, like, hey, I see you're covered for 100,000, so I think you can pay us 100,000. So keep that in mind if you have cyber insurance information, you might want to put that in a secured offline storage space too, so they can't get access to that in case you're breached. And the other thing just to note is that these groups do work with initial access brokers, which is a whole nother game, where they're just trying to get initial footholds in environments and then work with the ransomware groups to get the ransomware deployed. But one of the things that they're looking for beyond just easy phishing is just remote access. They'll scan the internet looking for weak remote access. So, auditing what you have exposed externally is super important, especially in healthcare, where you have exposures to a lot of those third-party vendors and things, and different clinics that you may work with and such. So super important.
Indeed. And absolutely. And to follow up on that, credential access and those remote access systems being available, we see it quite a bit, and not just RDP, but also with like VPN endpoints, things like that. Definitely something to be aware of. And software vendor and Internet of Things exposure, this is how your interaction with other vendors, whether it's software vendor, hardware vendor, what have you, may introduce risk into your environment. And there's a couple of different ways that this can happen. It could be that this is a supply chain attack, right? We've seen this with 3CX. We've seen this with SolarWinds, most popularly, where rather than targeting the healthcare organization or any organization directly, what the threat actors do is attack the suppliers, right? Those third parties that they work with. Going all the way back to practically a decade ago with Target, they didn't want to attack Target directly, so they attacked the HVAC workers that they were contracting to get in physically to those systems. Same thing with a lot of these large organizations. Large organizations will be using predictable software like 3CX for voice over IP, like SolarWinds for network monitoring and administration. When you're reliant that much on a third party, those threat actors are going to go after that third party rather than you directly, because if they can get into that third party, they're not just into your organization, but every organization that uses that supplier, and they can pick and choose exactly what they want to do. That's bad enough, but also issues with vulnerabilities being introduced to your products, whether it's software or hardware. And hardware tends to be more of a issue that we see, typically because of these hardware manufacturers. They don't really have a lot of experience connecting to the network. They are mainly concerned about the hardware working. And then someone said, hey, you know what if we could change something from a web interface or from something else? What if I could access data or telemetry from this device remotely and pull it into a central location? Great idea for our new feature for our next version. But when they implement that, they don't really apply the product development lifecycle or software development lifecycle that includes security auditing as part of that. They're used to hardware, and that's why a lot of these IoT manufacturers do have issues with vulnerabilities in their products. A lot of them are still sort of wrapping their heads around the software side of things and the connectivity side of things, where most of their engineers have been focused on just how that device works and making sure it works flawlessly every single time. And then we just get our regular standard vulnerabilities, right? MoveIt was a big example of this recently. MoveIt being used for moving massive amounts of data between organizations that are sharing data. A ransomware group, Clop, found a zero-day vulnerability in MoveIt. So this is a vulnerability that they discovered nobody else knew about. They were able to develop an exploit for it and start exploiting it before anybody even knew that it was out there. At that point, with a 0-day, the vendor's going to have to rush out a patch. But then the healthcare organizations or any organization with MoveIt needs to apply that patch. And that's where we get into a long tail of risk being introduced. So all of these things, whether it's hardware, software, supply chain, all of these can introduce risk. I picked DICOM out here. DICOM is a imaging protocol and imaging systems for MRIs, for X-rays, mammograms, you name it. One of my researchers actually discovered a vulnerability in Canon Vitria DICOM administration systems. It's a cross-site scripting vulnerability. A lot of people dismiss those, but they can be rather critical depending on how they're implemented. What's interesting about DICOM is because, one, they're unique to the healthcare industry almost primarily, right? So this is a situation where you're going to see something in healthcare that you don't see in other organizations. Two, it contains extremely valuable information, right? This is healthcare, this is PHI information that tends to be a lot more valuable than just straight PII, which are names, email addresses, et cetera. And three, they tend to be exposed publicly, right? A lot of these DICOM servers, we ran a search on Shodan, which lists all publicly accessible services. And there are thousands of DICOM servers available right now publicly on the internet. I'm sure a lot of them are not properly secured, and they're holding a lot of valuable information. And then finally, this is a great example of patches going uninstalled. We discovered this vulnerability. We worked with Canon to patch this vulnerability. Canon issued a patch for this vulnerability. Are healthcare organizations patching their software? We're not seeing it. In fact, even when we report these types of vulnerabilities directly to healthcare organizations, they still take quite some time to patch. And for a lot of the reasons I already mentioned, right? This isn't lazy admins. This is the complexity of the organization in general. So for these, you want to conduct regular pen tests. You want to look at vulnerability scans. Make sure that you're responsible for what you have in-house, especially looking at software versions and making sure that if there are any critical vulnerabilities, that they're prioritized first. And probably the primary obstacle for doing all of that, from my perspective, tends to be having a proper inventory of your systems. If you don't know what you have on your networks, what you're supposed to be controlling, where your data is going, there's no way you can close your security gap at all. So making sure you know what assets you have in your environment that you're responsible for, what data is stored on those assets, and keep that up to date ongoing. Our systems are live, they're dynamic, they're not static. That Visio diagram from 9 months ago is not going to work. So we want to make sure that this is kept up to date constantly so that you can prioritize your risk assessments. You can prioritize how to apply patches properly. You can pick your most vulnerable systems, the ones that are really introducing risk, and lock those down first and work down. So I find inventory being the most important thing here. Good. Okay.
I got you, Carl.
You got it. Go ahead, man.
I got it. So we thought it would be great to really dissect the attack flow for healthcare. So real quick to set the stage, we want to walk through a typical attack flow from initial foothold where attackers are coming in and getting that initial beachhead, and then what they're going to do next from initial payload to some expansion and pivoting and dropping additional malware to perform additional functions. And then finally, their exfiltration or final payload post-compromise. And there's a lot of different ways to accomplish these goals. However, the attack flow is generally going to follow that line. We'll talk a little bit about some different threat actors and the threat tactics in this attack flow, but I highly recommend you reference the full report, which goes into detail on a lot of these. We're just going to, we only have an hour here, so we're going to touch on one particular type of an attack or high level about this attack, but really dive into that report because we break it down quite comprehensively. So, all right.
Yeah, phishing and BEC, business email compromise, again, it's number one method that we see threat actors using to get that initial foothold, right? And this is where they're just establishing a presence in the network. That initial system, that initial IP address, whatever it happens to be, it's typically a workstation, right? You have a employee that has opened up an email, was compelled by the content of the email to either open an attachment or click on a link, or open an attachment and click on the link in the attachment. We see this all the time. And the reason we continue to see it all the time is because those techniques are constantly changing. And a lot of times the most vulnerable system on our networks is the human behind the keyboard. It's very easy to target them directly than it would be to, say, develop exploit code for some vulnerability that was just announced, right? There's a really big bang for your buck here because people continue to fall for these because they tend to be very compelling. We see the tactics changing all the time. About this time last year, Microsoft finally, by default, eliminated macros in most of the Office suite. And I say most of the Office suite because they left out OneNote and one other publisher as well. But OneNote specifically was left out of that arrangement. And what did threat actors do? They started sending out OneNote documents with those same macros. So there's an entire shift in those tactics specifically because of the security controls that were put in place. OneNote's gone by the wayside, and we're seeing a lot more these days that the primary trend is HTML files that are attached to emails, and then PDFs with embedded links. HTML is really big right now. A lot of people think that HTML files are safe. You see an HTML attached to an email. It could be that the person's signature at the bottom was stripped out and then attached to the file. We see that quite a bit, right? It could be just the rich text version of the email. There's all kinds of things, but people think that HTML is just a text file. It's safe. HTML has scripting capability, and when you have scripting capability, you can execute code. So these HTML attachments are really big. They're getting a lot of response. They're getting a lot of compromises through this. So we're seeing it quite a bit. Mitigations. You definitely want to conduct mock phishing exercises. This should be ongoing as part of your security awareness training. And like Sean said earlier, reward your employees if they're actually working with the program, if they're excited, even if they report something that it isn't phishing, what actually was a proper password expiration email or something like that. They're looking, they're paying attention. This is important. Reward those employees for doing so and develop that culture.
I'm just gonna double down on that because it's something that I'm passionate about. If you reward publicly like those types of things, everyone else is gonna start looking at that and want to also participate in the game of security. I promise. They want give out a Starbucks gift card for most spam emails that are reported to IT. If you make a public announcement with a nice little reward, everyone's gonna follow suit and want to just gamify it, gamify security.
100%. And again, this is the avenue that most threat actors are taking to compromise your organizations. This should be a priority, this type of program. And utilizing techniques, BEC is really big, right? This is where a threat actor pretends to be somebody on the seaboard. Hey, I'm stuck in Seoul, Korea right now, and I have this massive deal on the table. I need your help to transfer some money into this account so I can finish this deal. Just something really quick. A lot of times these are very compelling because they'll do the reconnaissance ahead of time to sound like the CEO or CFO or whatever. And with with social networks and LinkedIn, there's all kinds of reconnaissance they can do just with open source intelligence.
I'm just going to add one more piece there. Just bringing back the ChatGPTs and LLMs and the deep fake. I think that's we're going to. This technology and the accessibility of that is so rapid right now that I expect to see a lot of the deep fake type nature where you might actually get a video call from somebody in the organization asking you for something, and it's actually just a deep fake with some chat GPT feeding the text. So it's gonna get more interesting as we look at how that impacts social engineering and this initial footholds.
It is going to be massive. There's so many free tools right now that will do voice cloning. So we don't even need the video. The technology is right there for voice. And you go onto YouTube, find a keynote speech from a CEO, use that as your audio sample, and suddenly you can provide any kind of script that sounds exactly like that CEO. Again, we called it an emerging threat because we're not seeing these things right now, but we will. I can almost guarantee it. Good. So after we have an initial foothold into the network, right? We have that workstation where somebody has clicked on the wrong email. We have that access to that system. A lot of times, that initial foothold is going to be a little bit shady. So one of the first things that a threat actor is going to do is download their initial payloads, right? This was typically going to be things like, say, Bootloader. Bootloader is a huge loader right now, and these are just basically platforming malware that are put in place to give the threat actor the stretch and the availability to really load up their tools and figure out exactly what they want. And it depends on the situation, depends on the specific compromise. Do they want network sniffers? They want to download rats or info stealers? They're going to have a script in place. They're going to pretty much know what to do once they actually get that foothold, and they're going to expand. We do see a bit of local built-in tools as well. PowerShell is still really popular. It's built into every Windows system at this point. So if a threat actor lands on a system and doesn't have access to their own tools, there are a lot of local tools that are built in that will help them out. PowerShell being one of them, but you also see @jobs, cron jobs, lol bins are really popular, where these binaries just exist on the system and can be used to either download data as maybe a fake update or something like that, or just pull down any additional tools that they may want locally on the system. For this, conduct regular audits of your applications. Make sure that you know what's running on your systems. This would be a good way to spot anomalous binaries, which are probably malware. Whitelisting applications can be very useful. It can also be very problematic depending on how complex and large your organization is. But if you say that these are the list of applications that are allowed to run, that this user needs to do their daily job, and nothing outside that executable set is allowed to run, you can block a lot of malware that way if you have that capability. Yeah, again, access control, least restrictions available, and auditing all along the way. And it's not enough to just turn auditing on, monitor your audit logs.
Yeah, take a look at, just as an additional bullet point, take a look at the LOLBAS project, LOLBAS project. It's on GitHub. You'll see a lot of the living off the land binaries that are being used or could be used or weaponized, and just getting yourself familiar with Windows systems internals that could be used in a malicious way is super important.
Absolutely. Good. So we have our initial foothold, right? We've got the foot on that workstation. We've downloaded our tools to the system, and now our job is to expand and pivot. That initial workstation is not going to be probably the system that we're actually looking for, right? This isn't the system that has the valuable data that we're looking for. So we're going to try and expand from that system and pivot. Sometimes it's called lateral movement, looking for the systems that actually have the data that is our target. At this point, we could be using info stealers. We'll talk about info stealers in a second, which are specialized malware that do nothing but steal data. And typically, this could be banking information. This could be crypto wallets. But always on that list are going to be credentials. And with credentials, we can probably expand this access to other systems. We're looking for things like domain admins, AD systems, things like that, right? We're looking to expand ourselves from this employee that we just compromised to an administrator, somebody with actual access and rights to the data we eventually want to steal. Credential grabbing is relatively easy. A lot of the info stealers that will sit on the system are going to be grabbing from your local browsers, right? It could be installing a browser plugin that will work as a proxy to intercept any credentials that you happen to be typing into the system. And there's all kinds of methods for decoding encrypted data sets on the system itself. They're generally not encrypted all that well, and vice versa, a way to grab it in transit. Even though that session may be encrypted, HTTPS, TLS, when you're on one of the endpoints, that encryption doesn't matter for grabbing those credentials.
Yeah, I'll just say there, in threat hunting, we find unsecured credentials all over the place, whether it's from IT automation scripts or it's some custom applications, which is very heavily used in healthcare. We'll see that, sometimes there are hard-coded credentials, which is really bad. But also, just seeing things where just password files, right? Somebody's got some passwords in a document, Janet's passwords to VPN or something silly like that. So we see it all the time when we're threat hunting, and it is absolutely the thing that the attackers are looking for. So when we're threat hunting looking for that stuff, imagine a threat actor is actually doing recon looking for that stuff.
Yep. And the post-it note with the password under the keyboard is now the Excel spreadsheet in a folder on the desktop. I would rather have a physical token than something that can be replicated on the system. Good. Good. So I want to talk about info stealers a little bit more. I mentioned them quite a bit, but in place and in transit info stealers, right? Either looking for data that is already on the system or installing itself as, an adversary in the middle or something like that as a proxy, which are going to be grabbing data as you're typing it into a browser, a separate application for programming, or it could just be listening to the network. A lot of times we see that network communication is not properly encrypted, and just loading up a network sniffer might be enough to grab credentials that you may want. We see this quite a bit. In fact, I think one of I forget the manufacturer's name. I probably wouldn't say it anyway. But there was an infusion pump manufacturer that was still using a Telnet and FTP, clear text protocols, unauthenticated, to access and either change configuration data or grab patient data back from those devices. When you sniff networks, Telnet, FTP, I just see those ports and it stands out like a sore thumb. So be aware of that as well. Dark web monitoring is I recommend too, although it should probably be a lower priority. It's not a bad thing. We do it quite a bit, especially for our customers, looking at specific customers and monitoring the dark web for any sort of activity, credentials for sale for that organization, et cetera. So it's something you may want to add to your arsenal as well. Good. So they're in. They got that foothold. They were able to grab their toolkits. They were able to expand and pivot to the systems that are most valuable to them. They grabbed your employee database. They grabbed your patient database. What now? We see a couple things, right? So there's primarily maybe three types of categories. You have your typical smash and grab. A lot of times these are opportunistic, right? They just found a hole, went in, tried to grab as much as they possibly could, and get away with it before they get caught or controls get put into place. The flip side of that is something that's hyper targeted, where they're looking for something very specific in this organization. They know what they're looking for. They've done the reconnaissance. They may want to be on the network very quietly for a very long period of time to continue that reconnaissance. And then they're going to slowly grab that data and maybe even slowly exfiltrate it. The slower they go, the less chance that they're going to be detected. And it gives them time to really plan out how to get the data that they're targeting. And then finally, we just see, widespread destruction. Some people just want to see the world burn. They're not interested in stealing the data. They're not interested in monetizing the data. They just want to crash things. We see this quite a bit in the current Russian invasion into Ukraine, right? A lot of the systems that we see the Russian cyber criminals targeting, they're not interested in doing anything but just tearing those systems down. And with healthcare, that can result in human lives lost. Average time to remediate is just too long. It's hard to see this chart here. But this is the response by severity, with critical on the far left. The severity of vulnerabilities that our analysts, our team, our researchers have found in our customer premises. And we tell our customers, you have these critical vulnerabilities. You need to patch them. And then we go back 2 or 3 months later and we find the same vulnerabilities. So this is a direct result of our customers, even when they hire us to help secure their networks, still not putting patches in place. And I've talked about the reasons for this. It's not laziness necessarily, but the complexity of the situation sometimes just ends up being paralysis. We need to get past that. We need to patch our systems. Good. Good. Anything else you want to mention there?
I think another thing too is, we see a lot of I need to do vulnerability testing to fit a compliance box, right? I need to do it to sort of check the box, and not really taking in the information that's provided and really acting on it. Those are actionable items. We see that sometimes too in threat hunting, where we will make recommendations because we see a lot of risk in an environment. And we don't take those lightly, because we know that once an attacker has that foothold in the environment, they are going to leverage everything they can get at. So by reducing the ROI for the threat actor, you're improving like far and beyond. If you make it harder for them to do what they need to do, they may just move on. That's the hope.
Exactly. And there's no such thing as 100% security. Nobody should be telling you different, right? You're doing your job if you are more secure today than you were yesterday. It can be a very gradual, incremental thing. So yeah, prioritize what you need to do, and try to move forward. Even if it's a slow pace, it's better than you were today. The point isn't to make yourself not at risk at all. The point is to raise yourself up the tree, so there's lower hanging fruit there. Let's go through some key recommendations.
Sure. So we're just gonna, kind of talk about these mitigations. We walked through those along the way, but just to sort of amplify the information. Starting with focusing on the human element, it's super important. We talked about gamifying security for personnel end users. Absolutely 100%. Making them agents in your environment is super awesome. There's other things you can do. Multi-factor everything. That's been well and good and known from an external perspective, but even internally, it should be done for critical assets. Regularly rotating passwords. It seems so security 101, so basic, but in threat hunting, we see it all the time, where we see even just local workstation accounts that are just not managed very well. That's exactly what the attackers are going to look for to sort of do that privilege escalation and lateral movement. We talked about email, definitely number one entry point. There are others, but phishing is number one. It's always going to be a thing. It's always going to be there. But having a layered defense in depth approach, even within email, is something that you can do. And then doing mock phish tests is super important. Continually testing your end users and also like executives. I think they really need it a lot, because sometimes they're not paying attention. Vulnerability management and patching, again, the security 101. It's super hard. We understand that in healthcare, especially, there's a lot of challenges there, but really focusing on priority and understanding what the priorities may be, and really doing a risk analysis on each of those vulnerable scans or penetration tests or even threat hunts that you may be conducting, and prioritizing each and every single time you do it is super important to stay on top of the game in that way. I talk about this one a lot. Inventory of your key assets, suppliers. I would say inventory users, of course. Inventory your applications, absolutely 100%. Inventory your vendors. Make sure you understand who's got access to your systems. If you have clinicians or doctors from other environments, what are they bringing in? If it's bring your own device, it's super important to understand all of those vectors are going to add complexity and increase your attack landscape. So having a inventory of those things is really important to understand in your baseline. You'll never be able to detect anomalous behavior if you don't understand what normal should look like. So really having an idea of what that is it's really a top thing that should be done. Response processes. So we know that if you're being targeted, I don't want to say it's impossible. Time and money, right? So for threat actors, if they want to get in, they're going to find a way to creep in. It's almost impossible to find every little hole that they may crawl into. A lot of these threat actors are very much like octopus. They'll squeeze through anything they can find. So in just knowing that, then detection and response becomes absolutely critical, and having a good response plan to mitigate the length of time that a threat actor may be in your environment and exfiltrating data or doing some other sort of damage is super important. So practicing, always practicing, how are you going to address this? You know, we know ransomware is a threat. Do you have a plan in place? Have you practiced that plan? Just be really fluid in that, because it's really critical that you do that, because you don't want to be caught with your pants down in that situation. It would be really bad. And especially with human lives on the line too, that just adds another critical element to it. And then regularly doing threat monitoring and hunting, monitoring and hunting is absolutely the thing you have to do. You have to constantly look at the data within your environment. You have to understand the ingress and egress, so the inbound, outbound activity, the movement within your environment. And if you're not looking at that or monitoring it, you're going to miss the threat actors inside your environment. 100% of the time, there's so many ways to evade detection. We're in a situation where, you know, you have to have security technologies in place to provide the telemetry, but it's not a set and forget scenario. These technologies are only as good as their latest signature that they may have, or latest known attack maybe, where there's some heuristics involved. But you have to really dig through the data to find to discover new anomalies and even discover risk that you didn't know about. So super important.
Definitely. And yeah, just a little bit about us real quick, just to close things out. Again, this all comes out of our SpiderLabs team. And you can see all of our little statistics here. So the thousands of hours we spend in pen tests globally, vulnerabilities being addressed, web infrastructure. So this is our back-end pure play security research team and practitioners, right? It's great working for this organization because you know, we have such deep expertise. I'm constantly amazed by my colleagues here, and the difference of the diversity of voices that we have on these teams as well, globally across the world, working with independent groups with their own perspectives on security and their own unique creative solutions for what we have. Machine learning is really big for us. Keeping on top of GPT is really big for us right now. And you can see that in how our research gets covered externally and publicly. Good. I'll leave that at that. Excellent. So that said, we do have a couple minutes left for some questions.
Yes, we do. Thank you, guys. And just a quick reminder, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar recording via email by the end of the week, along with a link to download the briefing. And if you're interested in learning more about today's topic, you can submit a question by clicking the mail icon at the bottom of your screen. So yes, we have had a couple of questions come in. The first one is, do you expect the number of attacks on hospitals to increase in the next coming months or years?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. Absolutely. It's been an existing trend for a while now, and we're seeing it escalate year over year. It seems almost exponential. So the end of this year is going to be a tough one. And going into next year, it's going to be probably even worse, which is why it's important right now to start to get a hold of these if you haven't already.
Yeah, and I think the stat that we had there was like the 24% of critical infrastructure for ransomware attacks was in the healthcare organization. That was reported by the FBI. So I only see that increasing now that it's like, it's no longer part of the don't attack healthcare and rules of engagement anymore. So I expect it to just continue and ramp up.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Next question. Would you say that a lot of providers still use legacy systems? If so, why is this dangerous?
Yeah, we see legacy systems all the time. And a lot of them, they're dangerous for multiple reasons. A lot of times legacy systems are not being actively kept up to date, right? They're legacy for a reason. The vendor, the manufacturer isn't supporting them any longer. Also, we see a lot of times where those the legacy systems are in place. They're legacy not because patches haven't been developed for them, but because patches haven't been placed on those systems. Some of those legacy systems just don't have any capability to be secured any more than they already are. So yeah, legacy systems can introduce a lot of risk to an organization for all of those reasons. I definitely recommend, again, inventorying your assets, finding out exactly what you have on your networks, and then based on that inventory, you can decide what systems you need to prioritize, what systems are either requiring more security or what systems are actively introducing risk into your environment that need to be closed down.
Yeah, I would also add there, like, I think when a lot of people think of healthcare, they immediately think of hospitality. They immediately think of hospitals, right? But there's a lot of low budget clinics out there. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have any staff. So legacy systems, just keeping the business operating is something that is out there, and it's a risk.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've got another question. And this gentleman, he says he may have joined a little late and you already went over this, but what are the top goals of those who attack healthcare systems? Is it sabotage? What can you go into more detail on that?
I would say the top goals are usually around money. So ransomware is a way to collect money, but also taking PHI and selling that is a way of making money. So I think a lot of it is financial motivated. But certainly, sabotage is something that we're seeing as a part of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, right? We're seeing where healthcare systems are actually actively attacked just for destruction.
Yep, but I agree. Money's the main thing here. If it's not destruction, their end goal is money, right? If it's stealing PHI, if it's compromising a specific account to monitor inbound email, all of those activities are eventually supposed to result in money for the threat actors.
Okay, thanks guys. We are at the end of the session. If you have any additional questions, feel free to submit them and we'll be sure to have one of our security experts follow up with you. And just as a quick reminder, you will be receiving a copy of the webinar recording via email by the end of the week. And if you're interested in learning more about today's topic, you can submit a request by clicking the mail icon at the bottom of your screen. Before you leave, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to fill out our post-show survey to rate this session. You can view that below. You will also be prompted to take the survey at the conclusion of the webinar. Thanks, and do you guys have anything else to add? Otherwise, I'll close out.
I just want to say thank you and stay vigilant. Yep.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Thank you guys. And thank you everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.